Joining us in studio, Jackie Shandro, political analyst. We have Zwagele Mngwango, KZNDA leader, on the phone. As Kodwa's ANC national spokesperson. Good evening to all our guests. We'll start with you, Mr. Kodwa, and thanks so much for joining us again. Condolences to the Magaqa family, the ANC fraternity, and South Africa in general. In hindsight, though, do you think that having cited some concerns around his safety, Usindiso, if he were redeployed, that his life could have been spared?
Well, firstly, Cindy, let me start to sincerely apologize to you. I was supposed to join you in the studio. I got delayed after many other interviews that I had to do. And I thought it's only appropriate, to be fair to you, that I do telephonically. I think when somebody has passed away, in a manner that Comrade Cindy Magaqa has passed away, it's quite dangerous to make any speculation. What could have happened? What could have led to? What could have happened to stop what had happened not to happen? And I think those speculations, among others, is what may cause what is called recycled violence. It may just be important that we allow authorities in this regard to establish the facts before we make any speculations, regardless of what we think politically in terms of our political spectrum. And I think it's important that as we mourn the passing away of a fearless fighter, that we don't add more to already environment in KwaZulu-Natal, which is concerned to us, that we should not degenerate to a situation of pre-1994 in KwaZulu-Natal. Whoever is involved, there is nothing called political killing. That is criminality, and it must be dealt as such.
Whichever way you look at it, Mr. Kodwa, is that the threat on his life, the late Cindy Magaqa, had been well documented. It wasn't the first time that, he had either said anecdotally that he feared for his life because of his nature of wanting to expose corruption, that there would be people who would want to eliminate him. So that's the point I'm making, that maybe the police, be it authorities, political figures, to be able to preempt these kind of attacks and to take them seriously enough in order to protect the life of the person that is laying the complaint.
Absolutely, I agree in principle with you, although not suggesting the cause of the incident that led to his death. But it's important is that our commitment, our desire to make sure that we have a corruption-free administration in whatever sphere of government, whether it's a municipality level, like in Mzimkhulu, whether talking about the province, we need to make sure that those whistleblowers, they are protected in terms of our laws, and therefore we don't have speculation after effect that perhaps we could have done better. We must make sure that there is sufficient mechanism for anybody to bring any information about corruption, because corruption is stealing from the poor.
All right, please stay on the line. We also have Zwagele Mngwango, KZNDA leader. Good evening to you, Mr. Mngwango, and thanks so much for your time. I think these killings will stop, if, considering the commission, we run a commission, and the police involvement, but we still don't see an end in sight of these killings.
Good evening. Firstly, allow me to pass our condolences to Cindy Magaqa family and the ANC. As we know, he belonged to the ANC years and years. I knew Magaqa since 2006 when we went together for youth parliament, and we've been together since then. And it is true, he was a brave man. He stood for what he believed is right, and he will always fight for that. But allow me then to say the challenges we are facing around the killing in KZN particularly. It's around corruption, around state coffers. And we see that those who are fighting against corruption are the ones who become victims. And the problem we are facing is we are not really doing well in arresting the corrupt individuals. And you see the killings. It's not only politicians, but it's also politicians and employees of the municipalities. And if you look around who is being killed, it's mainly a politician who is fighting against corruption, or it's an official who is fighting against corruption. So the issue is, as political parties, we must ask ourselves, what is our role? As leaders also, what is our role to ensure that we protect whistleblowers, we protect those who are fighting for the communities? Because at the moment, unfortunately, you can count the number of people being killed in the province. You can see.
But what makes it so difficult, in your view, to just curb, at least at some point, where we can see a reduction in the number of killings in the province?
the problem is we have just institutionalized corruption. The system itself is rotten to a point where those who are using internal structures to fight corruption, they become an enemy to those who are corrupt. And the system itself is not working. For example, Systems Act doesn't allow councillors to instruct officials in terms of who should get a tender. In fact, the law separates now that only officials can award tenders, but you still find the politician getting involved in tender processes, and that's a problem. So it then requires leadership in government to ensure that we separate officials and politicians in terms of tender processes, because the issue here is not really the issue of ideology or views. It's not different views. It's about tenders, about money from the state.
Please stay on the line. We saw, beg your pardon, Jackie Shandu, just your view in that it would be a sad day and an indictment on this country if all these killings and the most recent, Siniso Magaqa, if their death is in vain, considering all the interventions, the Moarane Commission, as I mentioned, and all sorts of reports and investigations, but still there's no end in sight.
Sure. Thank you very much, Cindy. Good evening to you, to the viewers. And once again, I want to begin by expressing very heartfelt condolences to the family, to the friends, and to the comrades, the African National Congress, of the late Siniso Magaqa. May his soul rest in peace. I want to a great extent to agree with the sentiments expressed both by the national spokesperson of the African National Congress as well as the leader of the DA in KwaZulu-Natal. However, what I find somewhat missing in their analysis and their narrative is the importance rather of somewhat historicizing political violence in KZN, and particularly using the transition to democracy as a starting point. This is a province that was disproportionately affected by violence. You had an IFP in particular that was somewhat trying to arrest that process. You know, you had, of course, the factor of the NP. You know, there are regions or places like Hammarsdale, you know, like KwaMaphumulo, Mandeni, Esikhaweni, and there hasn't been any commitment to go back, because we are speaking about normalization of violence, where it just became part of daily lived experience, that at some point kids would see old people being shot at or being butchered down by machetes.
Just hold the thought,
sure.
Jackie. Let's get Mr. Kodwa to respond to that and way forward as well, that we seem to have been oblivious of the historical significance of what the nature of life was in KwaZulu-Natal prior to the democratic transition. Your view?
No, what's important is that history and experience are the best teachers. Even if it's one person, we shouldn't say because now it's 24 people have been murdered. Equally, there are 52 people suspected to have been arrested. So some work, there's progress being done from a point of view of law enforcement. But however, it would be a sad day indeed that they are passing people like comrades like Magaqa. It will be in vain that if it is alleged that it was because of corruption, it means we must double our efforts to fight corruption. But again, it's dangerous to make those speculations whilst there is a mechanism called the Moarane Commission and other mechanisms to establish the facts. Because outside of the facts, we may just be adding paraffin to fire in order to make it more worse in terms of the speculations. Even if you to suggest that this is the internal fight in the ANC, without any facts, you may just be adding to more problems in KwaZulu-Natal. And therefore, we need to be quite very sensitive in terms of the commentary we make. We need a commentary that is more informed. But the more dangerous thing we must not do is not to allow that situation to degenerate to a situation we experienced pre-1994. Pre-1994 for us is a lesson. Whatever condition, the situation may be different in terms of context, but we don't want to degenerate to that level. Even if it's 34 people who have passed away now, we don't need more people to pass away. We need to make sure that we arrest the situation. The perpetrators must be arrested, regardless of their political affiliation, must be arrested, and there must be convictions. And those convictions must be a lesson to others who think the best way to eliminate your opponent is to kill them.
Jackie, your response?
I beg to differ. It's not degenerating to go back and say, perhaps we did not get to the root of the problem. Perhaps we need to now go very deep and say, this is a new campaign, a new program that seeks to uproot that scourge, that normalization, that internalization, that the only way to resolve political problems is to resort to violence. But beyond that, it's not just about corruption. A province like KZN, unique to a certain extent, it's also about the economics. You have an economy that is dominated by a certain group, and you find that for the most part, ambitious Africans, whether within the political fraternity or outside in the business sector, the only way in which to accumulate wealth, more often than not, is through the public sectors. And that's where government contracts come into play. But don't forget, even that in that space, they still have to fight with the old guard, right? White monopoly capital. But there's also this unique Indian factor in KZN, which also plays itself out. So it's not something that you want to be overly simplistic about.
Yeah, let's get Mr. Mwango. Yes,
sure,
yes.
Sure.
Your response in terms of the policymakers and parliamentarians in going deeper, because it seems that in the Morana Commission, the Gleblands hostel almost being synonymous with a breeding ground for hitmen. The fact that it's okay, or it's almost like a career aspirations that some would have of making quick money, and not just looking at it as corruption vis-a-vis state transactions. Mr. Mwango, in your view, that a deeper investigation needs to go into why there's such a violence and volatility in KZN.
Yeah, thanks. Look, the truth is, if diagnostic is wrong, you are bound to not to heal the problem. We did welcome the Morane Commission because we strongly believe that it will guide us and give us a framework in terms of how we can deal with the conflict in KZN, especially because we moved away from a multi-party conflict. We went to intra-party conflict. And I think it's going to be good for this Magaqa also to admit that at the moment we are facing intra-party conflict, not to say it's only ANC. I think all parties are facing that challenge of intra-party. But we also want the ANC to come and also testify on the commission. As a DA, we went to a commission, we gave them our views as a party, why we think we're where we are today. And the commission itself has been crying foul that the ANC is not preparing to come to the commission. It's a concern that all of us, we are having, that ANC keep postponing the dates, are not appearing before commission. How are we going to find a solution if the ANC itself is not appearing before the commission that they've been calling?
Okay, Mr. Mwango, let's give Mr. Kotwa a chance to respond. Good evening.
Will appear before the commission, the Morana Commission, not because the DA says so, not because the DA wishes. And the commission has got a schedule. We don't all come on the same day and say we are here, we want to appear. We already spoken and arranged from a provincial point of view that as the commission is on recess now, when it comes back around the 18th of this month, we will be called as the ANC to make a presentation, not because the Democratic Alliance wants the ANC to appear, but we thought it's a good and the right thing to do as the African National Congress.
All right, so you're not avoiding going in front of the commission, but just to bring it back to the Cindy Magaqa, the killing, there's also been now allegations of a poisoning, Mr. Kotwa. Maybe you can give us clarity there, and if that's the case, it then speaks of a complete breach of security, even including in the healthcare or the hospital where he was.
I think we must handle this kind of a debate quite with care, because I don't think necessarily as we debate, it's difficult as it may be, that we must look for a justification for killing. That we must say because of this, as therefore we say it is right to kill. It is wrong. Regardless whether it's corruption, whether it's perception about corruption, killing is wrong. That is matter, it is criminality, it must be dealt with. Including the suggestions which have been made by certain individuals that there could be. I'm aware that there are statements that have been made by law enforcement agencies which are inappropriate structures and mechanisms to deal with such allegations of a possible poisoning. We can't comment further on that. That issue is being taken care of by a responsible and relevant authority.
All right, just stay on the line, please. Your response, Mr. Mwango?
Yeah, look, I think I agree with him. It would be wrong for us to speculate now about what was the reason. I think we must allow doctors to give us results as to what exactly ended up the life of Comrade Magaqa. But I think what we must agree on, that we must be brave enough to fight corruption and be honest to ourselves as leaders, because if we don't deal with those who are corrupt, we'll keep seeing our comrade dying on a daily basis. And I think this is Kodwa and myself must agree on that we'll be honest to ourselves and ensure that the services have to go to the people. If we don't fight corruption, there is no way we can be able to kill and stop these killings of our people in the province.
Yeah, but Jackie, if there's the kind of mentality you're saying that it's almost an inherent culture in parts of KwaZulu-Natal, that if people are hungry, they're dangerous, and whoever is seen to be a hindrance in him, the person getting an opportunity, be it a tender whatsoever, they then will be eliminated. It's a very dangerous precedent or practice.
Hence,
that we encourage.
I somewhat disagree with Mr. Mngwango's very reductionist diagnosis. He simply says it's corruption, but he does not historicize and contextualize corruption. That, for the most part, for Africans in particular, in KZN, it's my home province as well, I may as well admit that, the public sector is the only space. So it's either you are dealing with provincial governments or some municipalities, because the private sector is locked into the hands mainly of the white minority. And we know that those are issues the DA will never be concerned with. So whenever there's a problem, we must just take it to corruption. The greatest challenge that South Africa faces today, you'll never hear this from the DA, but it's a fact, is inequality, is ill distribution of wealth. It's not a matter of scarcity. This is a very rich economy, very rich country, we know this. But we have patterns, we have a structure of this economy that directs resources to a small minority. And then you have the overwhelming majority having to fight over small crumbs. And that leads to killings, that leads to corruption.
Your view, Mr. Mngango, or response?
Yeah, look, Sandy, let me say, the issue is not inequality. Yes, there is inequality in our country. But here, the killings of politicians, let's not deviate from the situation here. It's greedy. It's because those who want to access state resources, they move away and say, how do I eliminate those who are now blocking me from getting state resources? The problem here is, you will see, as I said earlier, officials who are fighting against corruption, exposing corruption, politicians who are fighting against corruption are the ones who continuously getting killed. You can go and see all the 95 people killed in the province.
Yeah, but Mr. Mngango, by your own admission, yes, sir, but by your own admission, you're saying that we need to get to the root cause of what perpetuates the violence and killings in KwaZulu-Natal, treated as a criminality, and go through the various investigations or interventions to get to the bottom. But you cannot say that inequality or poverty or whatever other reason is not a credible reason why this debate, or rather why people might want to kill, because of scarce resources or in access to it.
No, look, it would be wrong.
May I just make this point, because
yeah,
I think the leader of DA is becoming insensitive. This is not a time for grandstanding. This is not a time to make frivolous political points, narrow political points. If you've got any information about the cause of death of any person, don't come and be carried by microphones and shout about it. Take that evidence to law enforcement authorities. Like you make an allegation that the politicians are the ones who are influencing and determining the tenders, hence officials are being killed. You have that information, you are saying it in public. Take that information. If you are interested that the violence and the killing we see in KZN must come to an end, take that to the police, to law enforcement agencies. Don't go to the commission, just make public statements without any concrete evidence that points to exactly, so that we can deal and get to the bottom of these issues. So I don't think this is a moment to grandstand and shout about corruption, and yet when you're asked to present any evidence, you are unable to do so. What you are doing is nothing else but to advance narrow political issues which have got nothing to do with what we're dealing with now.
Mr. Mngango?
Look, then the denial is the problem. I think we are facing a problem here where we deny it obvious. my submission I'm making now is the same submission we made to the Commission, because we strongly believe that we need to protect. First of all, let's start by saying how many who are alleged to be corrupt have been arrested and prosecuted. That's where we start. So we don't see much every day, Cindy. We talk about corruption, but we don't hear much about prosecution of those who are corrupt. But we hear much about those exposing corruption getting killed every day. The question is, what are we doing about those who are corrupt? Are we getting them behind bars, or are they still outside? But also the influence of business to this killing. It's a concern for us, because there's a business now already, it's called Zinkabi, because this Zinkabi is a market now for this Zinkabi, where people who can't get tenders in municipalities are the one now working with this Zinkabi, with some individuals in municipalities, to say, this is a person who's now the block between you and this tender. There's a reality, and I think those Godwa must come out in the public and admit these things, because if we deny it, we'll never solve the problem.
But equally, would you admit that inequality also lends itself to a space where others have, the haves and the have-nots, and the gap widening there, and could potentially create the kind of conflict that we're seeing in turmoil?
Inequality is reality. It's there. All we need to do is, if we have tenders in the municipalities, let's not give them to the few. Let's give the majority. No. Because majority of people are outside there trying to get tenders from these municipalities. And the challenge is, you get few individuals continuously get access to these tenders, while the majority is on the fence looking outside. So
all right, Mr. Mwango, I'm afraid we're gonna have to leave it there. We're out of time. Jackie Shando, political analyst, and Zwagele Mwango, KZNDA leader, and Zizi Kodwa, ANC national spokesperson, joining us on the phone line. Thanks indeed for you at home for watching as well. We'll be back with the latest news update just after this.